Namaste and welcome to this exciting episode of Sathology Debunking Mythology. Sat means is a Sanskrit root word called truth. Sathology means the science of truth, study of truth. And opposite of that, it's a true antonym of mythology. Myth means, in Sanskrit, means a fake lie, imagination. It's a root word for mithya, mithyachar, mithyahankar, and many other mythic words. Mythic. So today, we are going to talk something very, very crucial because most of the times we get into arguments, and my very famous saying is arguments make the heart hard if it is without a purpose. And for that we have to remember tad vidhi pranip. We have to, first of all, pranipatena, very important. Pranipatena is more important than pariprashnena sometimes. And the second aspect is that we have to amanina manadena. We have to give respect to others and expect nothing in return. And that is also the definition of humility, to not be anxious for the satisfaction of being honored by others. This was told by Prabhupada in his book. Now, today we are also going to cover a very interesting topic, but without delay, let us welcome a very famous Rishi, Muni, researcher, and I'll give one more topic as debunker and a sathologist and a debunker of mythology. So without delay, let us welcome Sri Nilesh Nilkant Oak.
Namaskar, Aditya ji. Yes, my titles, at least as you see them, are going up. And you said pranipatena many times is important than pariprashnena. In fact, it's always important, because unless you have the reverence or a trust or a conviction to who you are asking the question, there is no point of asking a question. You are wasting your time and you're wasting the other person's time.
That's right. That's right. It's just like going to a sabji wala and trying to buy a potato, and you have to depend on the sabji wala's. आप उसे पूछते ये अच्छा है क्या? वो तो हर चीज को अच्छा बोलने ही वाला है. He's going to speak. Everything is good, right? You still ask them, is it good? So just to verify yourself, but there also you are practicing pranipatena in a very simple thing. But when it comes to Shastra, they don't want any guru. They don't want any parampara. They think, and they want to, the concept is, when I increase in knowledge, I can surpass my guru. So where is pranipatena gone then? So brings to an important point, which is plaguing the American society: human responsibility versus human rights. And, we are being karmanne va adhikaraste. I think the only adhikar given to us is karma. What is your viewpoint on that?
You said human rights versus human responsibilities. Let's not very much on the same topic, but let's look at the foundations of Indian Sanatan Dharma. Sanatan Dharma. How they balance, you can consider a tripod, how they perfectly balance this, the human rights, but human responsibilities. Before even you get to it, and you mentioned the word karma, so naturally it's going to be there. But before even we get to rights and responsibilities, the foundation is created in the Sanatan Vedic tradition by the absolute moral standards, niti dharma. And why do I use the word absolute? Because the relative morality can change from place to place, change from one culture to another. But absolute moral standards, absolute niti, should not change by definition. And also, what is it? That's like, for example, if we go to Bhagavad Gita, the Daivi qualities that are mentioned, Abhayam Sattva Samshuddhi, fearlessness, but humbleness, namrata, amanita, right? And then in between the kindness, in between these two, there is a long list of things. They are absolute moral standards, always searching for the truth, not compromising on the truth, doing your best. You may not always know the truth. That is understood, right? Our senses are limited. Our intellect is limited. So we might struggle. Now, once you have this, then there are two things. In English, I will say endurance in conduct, meaning never to give up on your karma. And of course, not worrying about the final outcome. That is not to say that you don't have a specific outcome in the mind. In fact, you definitely need a nischay, like you need a certain objective, you need a certain purpose, that's given, but you are not attached to the outcome, whether it succeeds or not. It's like prayatnam paryaptam. The efforts are enough. Your sincere, dedicated, tenacious efforts are enough, because the outcome may not be achieved for many reasons. So now that is like human rights versus human responsibility. So the human responsibility is that of endurance in conduct. And then let's talk about the human rights, the third one. And it's interesting that the absolute moral standards, endurance in conduct, and the third one, which is the freedom of thought. Now that is human freedom. The freedom of thought is there. And now somebody will say, well, but I want to do something and I feel like disturbing all other individuals for my own beliefs or something. Well, hold on. So you have a freedom of thought, but not without the absolute moral standards. So absolute moral standards, endurance in conduct, and freedom of thought. These are the foundations of Sanatana Vedic Dharma. And these top two, the last two, do a perfect balance between human rights and human responsibilities.
So human rights is a very important topic in Vedic Sanatana Dharma. Krishna directly mentions in Bhagavad Gita, Loka Sangraha, benefit of all. And Janakadayo, he gives the example of Janak Maharaj, the father of Sita, that he was a perfect example of Loka Sangraha. He used to, so earlier the kings never used to need a bodyguard because the population loved them like a father. And he was like a father. Like Yudhishthir Maharaj, Yudhishthir had a large number of bodyguards. It almost, you can say, according to Mahabharata, is 1 million bodyguards he had. But still, he was so loved, he could meet freely amongst the people. And so that was a concept there. And also the Vedic name of a Raja is Lokpal.
Yes.
Lokpal
and Purohit. Think of a Purohita, right? The person of in the Pura who is always looking at the well-being, so usually that would be a person with a great intellectual acumen, but also like a acharya, who has established himself. So Purohita, like the one who is looking after well-being of that place, Pura, like a city or a village or a town or even a specific area. Yeah.
So the Western concept of rights is something given by the king. Now, that was not the case in Vedic culture, because in Vedic culture, freedom of karma is always given to a living entity. That is the adhikar. That's the only adhikar. And then the guidance is also given, karma, akarma, vikarma. That guidance is also given by Krishna also.
Yeah.
So, but the Western concept of rights is a very exploitative concept. When they say human rights, what about animal rights? And because they're also citizens of the land. So, so earlier also, when the animals were taken care in Mahabharata war or in Mahabharata era and Ramayana era, the animals were the closest representatives of the king were appointed to take care of the animals, because it's Pashudhan. Like in Pandava's case, Nakul and Sahadev were responsible for cavalry, and they used to take care of the animals. So the animal rights were considered as important as human rights. So when you say human rights right now, what is happening is it is creating a huge ecological imbalance, because we are killing animals whimsically. And also human right concept, the Western concept, is a very limited concept, where it only touches the criminality aspect of it or punishment aspect of it. But what are the rights of human beings for growing their own food? Literally, through the commercial system, we have removed those rights. In California and other states, many other states, you cannot grow their own food. In fact, I was told, surprisingly, that the only true organic seeds for food is available only in one country, and that is Bharat, nowhere else. So how discriminative you think with this information is human rights versus human responsibilities from the Vedic perspective?
Well, India now has a state, which is Sikkim, for example, is now declared as a completely 100. It's a small state, granted, but it's declared as a 100% organic state. The other point that you mentioned about the animal rights, and you talked about the Mahabharata times, Ramayana times, even in our times, Now, sometime because of the pressures of population, pressures of resources, because remember, the India is a land that has been exploited beyond anybody's imagination by colonial powers for 1,000+ years. Okay, it's not easy to look good after one is being totally exploited for 1,000+ years. This is, by the way, the quote of my good friend and somebody you know very well, Jeffrey Armstrong. It's not very easy or good. Easy to look good when you have been exploited by every single possible means, every single possible way for 1,000+ years. But in spite of that, even right now, this is now monsoon season in India. And just like, see, I don't know the exact timing, but in the Western world, I know that even in the industrial times, there were no holidays before. People used to work for 7 days. I don't know the exact history, like when that thing finally changed. Then someone thought, maybe Taylor or somebody before, that if you give a break to your workers for 1 day, actually their productivity goes up. And then the 1 day holiday came, and now we have Saturday, Sunday, and so on. But in India, where I grew up, the method is followed, and you would relate to that, Adityaji, which is even when through the farming season, the animals like bulls who are used for plowing and all that, they are given a break of 1 day in a week. There is that particular day decided where they get the rest, they get the full rest. And where I grew up, again, the animals, especially the cows and the cattle, I'm talking for most part, obviously the dogs and others, they were very much family members. They were very much a family members, So, I have seen that, and people going and doing just like a Guru Purnima, we will do namaskar and, the dandavat to the Guru. The family members doing the dandavat to the cattle, to the bulls of the, the family before they are put on the plow.
Yeah, we know that we have a cow in the house, so we know how it's done. So the Shastrarth, now very misunderstood concept in India. Earlier, the Shastrarth was done to explain the Shastra, all viewpoints of the Shastra to the common people. And the Shastras were done within two Vidwan who are not there for their ego, but to establish a point of reference. Munya sadhu prishtoham bhavad bhir loka mangalam. Now, only sadhus can do Shastra. And sadhu means one who cuts somebody else with good arguments, or who leads somebody else to a good destination. And ultimately, karma bandhan se moksha is the moksha from karma bandhan is the biggest benefit, Right. But nowadays, that concept is lost. Now, a very famous one is Nimai discussing with Keshav Kashmiri. Now, Keshav Kashmiri has come to defeat Nimai in West Bengal. And ultimately, Nimai accepts on one shloka, Ganga. He says, Ganga pe how many names you can say? And Nimai says 108 in seconds. He creates new names. And Keshav Kashmiri was shocked. And then he accepts defeat, but Nimai or Chaitanya Mahaprabhu embraces him and says, you are bigger Pandit than me. And that was the outcome of the Shastra. But the benefit is me and you. Because now we know 108 names of Ganga, River Ganga, Mother Ganga, you call it. So that is the purpose of Shastra. What is your viewpoint on that?
The confusion is not limited to India. The confusion is global. Okay. Now, in the, say, university system, because many of our viewers from university, you see the Oxford Union debate, and those, definitely there are very good rules that they have developed, and it is a joy and pleasure to listen to them sometime. Even then, it's very important to point this out, that many times people will admit, and you can see those in the comments. If you see the YouTube debate, the debates at Oxford and whatnot, and then put it on the YouTube, or debates anywhere, held anywhere, you will see in the comments, you will say, well, this guy is right, but this guy won. Okay. Now this is funny, right? Because this guy is right, but this guy won. Why would that happen? Actually, that should not happen. If somebody, this could be a bias of somebody who's writing a comment, but if it is factually correct, that it should not happen that the person who won was not right. Okay, because the rules of the game, rules of the Shastrartha should be such that it leads to the growth of knowledge. It
Correct.
takes us closer to the truth.
Correct.
Okay, so let me actually start sharing. And is it okay if I start sharing?
Yes, please,
okay.
please. No, you made a very good point.
Yeah.
Because they first of all, they've misunderstood the word democracy. But democracy word, our common friend, which will refer again, he also mentions rightly, and his guru also mentioned democracy. So democracy was the word invented to deprive the Native Americans of their rights to vote or represent in an election. That was very clearly the word, and it doesn't translate. So introducing democracy in academic circles where the votes count, that is the biggest fallacy, according to me.
So back to the debate. So this is, I find, a very interesting comment, which is many people will say this guy is right, but this guy won. And how is that possible? Because the modern rules of debate, and I'm not saying everything, there is a problem everywhere. Actually, many of them are precise and very good. They come from this Nyaya Darshana, and they come from the Darshana Shastras, and of course the improvisation done in the Western society. So that's all good. I mean, anything good we should take. But some of the rules put more emphasis on like rhetoric and like polemics. So sometimes, that is kind of allowed. And I'm not saying it's not allowed in the Nyaya Shastra. Today we may or may not talk about it. But Nyaya Shastra says when the Jalpa Vitanda, when the polemics rhetoric is allowed and when it should not be allowed, and how actually it has no role whatsoever to play in discerning the truth. Okay, so let's go through some of these. You also, today being my greetings to all of the listeners. Today is celebrated as a day of a Guru Purnima. Guru as in teacher, but teacher in the sense of a Acharya, which is to say that teacher who not only teaches, but also follows in his or her life what he or she teaches. That's an Acharya, because they actually practice it. And that is in an Indian context, in Sanatana Dharma context, it is celebrated as a Guru Purnima, the full moon day of the this particular month of Ashada, the Indian lunar month. And so my greetings to all of you on this day. So, for example, what is Shastrartha? Okay, and I'm going to give you the English meanings of it. But before that, even in the world of a Sanskrit language, okay, and that's the beauty of Sanskrit language, that one particular word can and actually do have many meanings. Now, somebody will say that can be a cause for confusion. Well, frankly, it's not limited to Sanskrit. That is true in any language. But Sanskrit is such a super rich language that depending on the context, it can take a different meaning. And so therefore, when we are taking the meaning, it should be taken in a context. But Shastrartha as a word, if you want to see what are the different meanings, what do you mean by Shastrartha? I mean, that's the topic. Well, again, I'm not going to go into all translations of it, but it may mean vada, and we will certainly discuss that. Tarka means a logical argument, like, abhipraya. It's like you basically studying somebody's work and giving a logical short summary of it. That can be seen as abhipraya. Tarka. Okay, you can analyze somebody's work and think of all possibilities, like plausible different interpretation, plausible solutions, right? Tatparya is like a summary. Bhava is like, say, think of an emotion that you get out of that particular thing that you might have read. Okay, and again, you have that tarka vitarka, adhyara, uttara pratyuttar. It's a thing, you can be simply think of it as a question and answer, just like you might have it in the class. Okay, vada vivada in the terms of a discussion, and many others, right? So I have got few words copied twice there, but that's okay. Artha, what's the meaning of it? What is the takeaway? Okay, what's the essence of all this discussion? These are various words, but let's simplify it for our purposes. So Shastrartha can be seen as an intellectual, philosophical, religious debate. So that's something many of you are familiar. I mean, if you have not watched one, just go to YouTube and just say debate. There are debates between what? The debates between creationist and evolutionist. debates between religious or theist and atheist. Okay. By the way, in an Indian context, the true Indian context, there is never a debate between theist and atheist. Okay. For a different reason. Because remember, I mentioned in a different context of human rights and human responsibilities when Aditya ji asked me that question. So the foundation is the absolute moral standards. Okay. Like a fearlessness, humbleness, kindness, and knowledge, always going after the truth, no matter what the cost. What it says, once you have this foundation, it really doesn't matter whether you are fighting whether the God exists or not. That's how trivial the debate or the discussion is thought when people talk of theism versus atheism. The Sanatana Dharma says, no, the foundation is the moral principles, okay, the absolute moral principles. If you are after the truth, then you will find out whether the God exists or not, what is the nature of God, and so on and so forth, whether it is a he or she, is it omnipresent or is it sitting in some corner that only you're going to see after you are dead? These are all philosophical discussion points. It's perfectly okay to do it, but that is not an issue, at least in an Indian system. But there are three broad ways we can, actually only three ways. Now, I won't even call it broad. These are a very specific way to describe it. These are the three reasons you can say there will be an argument, there will be a Shastrartha. The first one is called Vada Katha. Okay, Vada in the sense of a discussion, but it has a very specific meaning when we are talking in terms of the discussion or in terms of discerning the truth. So Vada Katha is actually a very healthy discussion to discern the truth. So it can be any subject. For example, it can be a subject about how to solve the water crisis in California, for example, how to solve the flooding problems around the world happening in the cities very close to the ocean. Okay, right now, India, there are places on the west coast of India going through that right now. Now, if city members come together, what is their objective? They don't want to just say this guy is wrong and that guy doesn't understand and mine is a better. No, if they are truly after the truth, after solving the problem, then it will be a healthy discussion. There may be agreements and disagreements, but the discussion is to discern the truth, to find the solution, to solve the problem. Okay, there is a very specific objective, nishchaya. Okay. Or a aim, goal, something like this. That's a Vada Katha. They can have multiple positions. People can have multiple positions coming to it. Take, for example, in the modern science, the phenomenon of quantum mechanics. We have the exactly same experiments performed multiple times with all kinds of ingenuity, very, very much of creativity. And the quantum mechanics output, like the experimental outputs, continues to give the same results. Now, to explain that, people are struggling. There are 14 plus very different, almost conflicting, contradicting theories to explain that same behavior of the quantum mechanics. Okay, that light particle duality, and you would have heard that. That's very healthy. Okay, there is no problem that there are 14 different theories, very much conflicting, contradicting each other, but they have a very sincere objective to explain that experimental phenomenon, explain the evidence. No problem. Just as a modern day, I gave you that as a discussion, like solving a water problem someplace, solving a flooding problem in another place, solving the problem of education, solving the problem of drugs. Any problem, and we are sincerely working on it, that's any healthy discussion is a Vada Katha. The second category is a Jalpa Katha. These Vada, Jalpa are Sanskrit words. Jalpa Katha is like a wrangling, or cavil, contesting two contradictory interpretation. They're not trying to solve any problem. They just want to say that my position is correct, your position is wrong. Okay, but at least we are saying there are two positions. Okay, so contesting two contradictory interpretations, that Jalpa Katha, and in this particular today's talk, we will see what is the plausible potential value of it. There can be some value, okay, but not a lot. In fact, just as to give you a feel, once I do the third one, I'll show you my personal interpretation of it. The third one is called Vitanda Katha. Okay, just a wrangling, waste of time, cavil. Okay, attacking others' views without establishing one's own. Now, views about what? The views about a very specific subject. Again, I'll just repeat the same. It could be about solving a flooding problem in one place, solving a water shortage problem in another place, solving why the frequent fires occur in another place, solving the problem of poverty, solving the problem of disease like our COVID, whatnot. Doesn't matter what it is. It's a very specific objective. It's very clearly explained, and we want to solve it. But the Vitanda Katha is one or both parties are attacking other parties' views without establishing their own. This is the worst kind. The Vitanda gets a negative score. So if there is a positive score of 100, like say Vada Katha, the most desirable type of a debate or Shastrartha, let's say if I give that plus 100 points, the Vitanda Katha gets negative 100 points. It's extremely undesired. It's a waste of time. Everybody's waste of time. And it doesn't lead to anything. Now, what about the Jalpa Katha? The Jalpa Katha is right in between. And just to be very liberal, okay, to that Jalpa, I might say it get plus 5 points because they're contesting two contradictory interpretations. This again does not lead to the solution. However, it does do some, it may rather do some good things. And I'll actually give you a list of it, which is to say, some person is almost feeling sure, hey, this solution is correct, or some team or some company is feeling that this is the final decision and we are going with it. Now, in a Jalpa Katha, somebody may say, well, hold on, have you thought of these risks? Potentially, you could be wrong here. Just like, say, if you're talking of a medicine, then what are the side effects? Have you thought about this? Do you really think that the benefit outweighs the side effects, and so on and so forth? So there is a value to it, but it is a value of plus 5 because remember, in case of a medicine or some problem, we are trying to still solve some problem. In the Jalpa Katha, it's not about solving the problem. It's about that something when they are doing it, two people just having different interpretations of something, whatever it is, and they just want to fight to see who is right. And that doesn't usually lead anywhere, okay? Because that's the beauty. Once you are looking at a specific problem to solve, it's very easy. Although the both people may not have found the best solution, may not have found the perfect solution, but if the objective is clear, it is not that difficult to realize which of the two solutions is a better solution. Or if there are multiple solutions, it's not that difficult most of the time to decide which one is a better solution. Okay, something very interesting. And I'll show you, if you get time, I can give you specific examples of that. These all kinds of different debates that I get involved because of my original work almost every day. I try to stay away from them, but then somebody in between who is reading the other person's side, they will copy paste something that other person said and bring it to my attention and says, Nilesh, what do you think of this? And, I may not even want to answer that, but just because the person who brought it to my attention, and if he's a sincere person, I'll at least try to give some answer to that person. So therefore, I get involved in the Jalpa Katha, Vitanda Katha, but just so that you understand, it's extremely undesirable type of debate, not worth wasting anybody's time. I would just give as a score, like the Vada Katha has a plus 100, Vitanda Katha has a minus 100, and Jalpa Katha maybe 5, okay? Because it can give you some insights. This is from that same Nyaya Darshana text. You can consider this as a text of logic, okay, in an Indian context. It says, now this is Sanskrit, Pravartana Lakshana Dosha. Now, what is it that leads to these three different types of debates? Okay, it says it is the faults, the people's action when they participate. Then it tells you, depending on the arguments they are using, depending on their behavior, depending on how they are writing, what they are writing, do they truly understand? Are they trying to solve a problem? It tells you whether are they really after the truth or they are just creating errors. It says it is through the activities of theirs we come to know their errors. Pravartana Lakshana Dosha. Okay, so the activities leads to error, but the error is noticed through their actions. That's what it means. And then it tells you three types of dosha, three types of errors: raga, dvesha, and moha. Now, those are three, in some ways, are related to those three types of Shastrartha. Now, the other two is not actually Shastrartha. It is said in the sense of that is what happens. It's not a desirable one. For example, number of you who are working in, say, philosophy of science, you would have heard the two names like Thomas Kuhn and then Karl Popper. What Thomas Kuhn is describing, actually, the book, I mean, I have read that book multiple times and I find it really trivial and really boring and tiring. Now, this may come as a surprise to many of you because, if you're taking a related subject like a philosophy of science in your academic curriculum, you will be given Thomas Kuhn and a great thing he did. I think it was a disaster. It was a waste of time. The person, you can read that book if you haven't. Because what he's doing is, it's not like there is no useful information, but he is describing what happens most of the time, even in science, even in scientific community, academic community, which is what? It happens like that last two, the jalpa and a vitanda. Many times people are just busy telling how the other party is wrong, or they are just want to prove their superiority without actually solving the true problem that they are after. Okay, so what he's saying is, even when a revolutionary theory comes, like Newton's and Kepler's and Einstein's, people should quickly embrace it if it matches with the evidence, but actually that's not what happens, even to the academic and scientific community. In fact, especially to academic community, to establish their own thing, they may keep on fighting why this is not correct and so on and so forth, many times without giving a better theory. That's a jalpa and vitanda. Okay, but let me just move on. So what the Nyaya Darshana very beautifully, it says there are only three reasons why the error occurs, error in the individual person's comprehension. It says raga, dvesha, moha. So I have given a crude translations just below those. Raga is an attachment, desire. Take, for example, the type of debate that you see between, say, creationist and evolutionist. Okay, so what is the reason for it? You can just see it here. Okay, again, you or me don't have to take a position, but there is a evidence for each of the positions. Supposedly, you as a intellectual person can evaluate that. But some people, you'll say, you know what, I don't need to listen to the debate, or I don't need any reasoning, I don't need any evidence to see. I am convinced that it is the evolution is the way, or it is the creationism is the way, because of it could be because of your attachment to a specific position. It's not a position because of a knowledge. Okay, it's not position based on evidence, but you have attachment. The second could be aversion or a detest or a hate or anger towards a certain position. This can happen for hundreds of reasons, right? Sometimes not based on a knowledge or evidence, but and that's why, like when Aditya began, like, some of the misconceptions that exist in American society, American academia about other places, many other places, but say specifically India, because we were discussing that, it may not be based on a knowledge. It may not be based on evidence. It could be based on an attachment to a certain place. For example, like most of the crowd being American, I'll say, growing up here now, I spent many years, 30 years here. And, I would hear that many times at the workplace, otherwise somewhere in a social gathering. Oh, America is the best country in the world, greatest country in the world. Now, nothing wrong with somebody feeling very attached to that statement. Now, and so as a fun, I mean, many times I would say, oh, well, okay, that's a great point. What other countries you have been? And many times I'm telling you guys, that person may not have left America to go anywhere. Now, some people will make a case that these days in the online world, the internet world, you get to see everything happening in the other parts of the world. Well, think again. I would encourage people to go to the other parts of the world, live there for some time, typically more than 6 months before the place starts growing on you. And I'm not talking of any specific place. You start appreciating. I mean, I was lucky. I got to go around the world and I have thoroughly enjoyed. I mean, every place has its own challenges. Okay. So that's what I'm saying. There can be attachment to a place. It can be attachment to a particular position, like such as a creationism versus evolution, or what are the other things we talked about? Oh, the vaccination versus no vaccination. Okay, the different types of medicine, the public schools versus private schools. I mean, you can take any subject. And then the last one, it says moha muda, that is asat, meaning which is not true, and lack of intellect. Many times we cannot reach the truth with our own intellect is because we don't have the sufficient intellect to figure this out. Many times we don't have the proper prerequisites, the required background knowledge. Now, how do these connect with what I just showed you? That's how they connect. Now, I have to explain what I mean by that. The Jalpa Katha, the goal in the Jalpa, the person especially who takes the debate, either the debate may begin with a Vada Katha to discern the truth, but quickly that individual will push the debate. This is also considered a straw man. Okay, they may push the debates towards something else, which is not truly the point of a debate. Which means what? Because the person knows he cannot win, okay, or he is not even interested in discerning the truth, that person took the original subject and very smooth, in a crafty fashion, turn it into something else where he thinks or she thinks they can win by argumentation and rhetoric and polemics and whatnot. So that's why I'm saying it's attachment, but they created a straw man. That's in a Nyaya Darshana tradition that is to be pointed out. The person is to be declared as defeated and removed from the debate. Okay. The second one, Vitanda Katha, which is what? The person only wants to prove that the other person is wrong. The other side is wrong. He or she does not want to prove that they are right. See, look at the funny thing. They don't want to prove that they are right or they are better. All that they want to show is that the other side is claiming they're right and now they are wrong, or they are wrong. And hey, if that's done, I have done my job. Well, that doesn't solve the problem. That does not generate the progress of knowledge. Okay, so what does generate the progress of knowledge? We will get that. It does happen through Vada Katha by using what? By truly caring to know the truth, that is a Sat and not a Sat, and by the use of our intellect. The intellect, which is what? Intellect with the combination, that's a Buddhi Yoga, right? So with the combination of the evidence, with the combination of a logic, with the combination of a background knowledge, okay, that's how we get to Vada Katha. So in short, if we have to take these three types of Shastrartha, again, I'll use the word Shastrartha even for Jalpa Katha and Vitanda Katha and Vada Katha, exactly in the sense Thomas Kuhn and Sir Karl Popper are discussing philosophy of science. So when Thomas Kuhn discusses what happens in science when the new theory comes, what he's describing is not what is desired. Okay, ideally, something else should have happened, but it doesn't happen. So similarly, even though the Jalpa Katha and Vitanda Katha are called Shastrartha, the right way of debate, I mean, the debate, it's not a right way of debate, but that's what unfortunately happens as a predominant thing. But what is their nature? I think Aditya ji, you also said very well at the beginning, something about arguments. Can you repeat what you said about arguments?
Arguments make the heart hard.
Harder, yeah. Arguments makes a heart the harder. See, this is what Jalpa Katha. What is the objective? To claim victory, somehow to show that that person won, like the Oxford debate I'm talking.
No, we all want to. The problem is that we all want to say we are right, and the worst thing is by proving somebody else wrong, then you're right, and that's the Western disease, because Western academics.
Yeah.
They claim their superiority by claiming Sanatan Dharma is wrong.
Yeah, but let's not ask them about whatever the other dharma exists. Well, there is no other dharma, but let's even simplify the religion. What other religion exists? They said that's not the subject here. We are talking about Sanatan Dharma, right? That's what they will say. And why just West? I mean, these things existed in the Indian context, but the Nyaya Darshana had such a strict rules, Aditya ji, that when anytime somebody moves into the Jalpa or Vitanda, and how do they move into the Jalpa and Vitanda? I mean, Nyaya Darshana provides such a beautiful script. Those people who are interested in the logic, those people who are studying law, I would definitely, and this is not limited to law, because law sometimes goes by what is there in legislated, but truly knowing the truth, I would encourage you to read Nyaya Darshana, which is to say, it gives, if you are making a logical argument in a Nyaya Darshana speak, there are 5 steps, which are the same 5 steps you find in modern science. Triangulation of explanation, prediction, testing, those are 3. In the context of a theory, number 4, and in the context of background knowledge, number 5. Those are the exactly same things, slightly different language. For example, it will say pratijna, hetu, udaharana, okay? And then finally, actually application, okay? And then the conclusion. So that is the same method. So Nyaya Darshana also tells you anytime somebody moves from the Vada into Jalpa or Vitanda, the person should be stopped right there. You should simply point out that person that, hey, he has moved the goalpost. You know, everyone understands the term moving the goalpost. That's like moving the goalpost. Original subject, the problem you're trying to solve is like whatever it is. Now you're no longer interested in solving the problem. You're only interested in an intellectual victory, or just even that is Jalpa, or just to show that the other party is wrong. They don't care whether they are wrong. You know, it's like two people fighting, you know, wrestling or gunshot. They don't care if they get killed, but they want to ensure that the other person is killed. You know, that's like a Vitanda. You know, one person may survive, but it's not going to solve. It's a very argumentative thing versus if you are looking for a truth, that is a theory, or in the Nyaya Darshana speak, we call it a hetu, reasoning. What is your foundation based on which you are trying to approach the truth? And as we said, Adityaji, in the foundation, like, you know, the freedom of thought. In that freedom of thought, the Nyaya Darshana or Sanatana Dharma, it doesn't say that your foundation should be same as the other person's foundation. The foundation can be different, like say in a science, like say creationist versus evolutionist. You know, we say, okay, yeah, both approaches. I mean, okay, they sound good. Now make your case. Present, we will take whichever is a better one. So you need a theory, you know, in both cases. If you don't have a theory, you already are defeated. You should not participate into the debate. And it is a responsibility of the people who are watching, whether they're watching during like Oxford debate type of setup, or whether they are watching, they have a juries there, right? Or whether they are watching in, say, reading the papers, books, peer-reviewed papers, or watching in social media. It is their responsibility. And if they don't follow their responsibility of ordinary people or intellectual, even they are held responsible, okay? They are considered defeated. That's how far Nyaya Darshana goes. So the Nyaya Darshana, Aditya doesn't talk about who won and who lost between the, say, two parties arguing about a certain problem, but it even holds responsible the judges, the juries, and the audience. Okay, it's also a reflection of the intellectual level of audience, whether they could discern the truth or not, or they could tell whether his person's argumentation and claim is better than the other person. So quickly, the last one. I hope you like this, which means what you have noticed is there's a lot of hard work. If you are getting into a debate, there's a lot of hard work, but many people will simply not bother to do the required work. Okay, depending on the problem, of course, sometimes the problem can be solved in no time. Other times the problem solving can take many years. I mean, some of you, we have talked about Arundhati Vasishtha. It took me like 15 years. Just one verse of Mahabharata took me 15 years. Bhishma Nirvana, like that 92 plus days versus 58 days, which is a very faulty argument, and there is no evidence in support of that in a Mahabharata. I spent 6 months. And you know what I'm saying? Everyone was saying 58 days. So I said, okay, 50 days must be correct. So actually, when I'm trying to match this to my date, it's just not happening. I spent 6 months trying to make sense of it in a different way. That's the kind of time it takes. And then Arundhati Vasishtha took 15. My point is, it's easy to look cool when you have done nothing. I mean, if you like this poster, you can borrow it and use it somewhere else. You know, that one pencil has not done anything, nicely sharpened and clean, you know, pointed, but it hasn't done anything. Now, this is my last slide actually. Let's look at the arguments versus theories. And Aditya ji said, argument makes our heart harder, right? Okay. Let's look at some of the positive things of argument too, which is what? That jalpa, Jalpa Vitanda, not so much Vitanda, but Jalpa. And what do the Jalpa and Vitanda do? They do make all kinds of arguments, right? They may get into the fallacies, they may get into futilities. Okay, that is how they are trying to win, by hook or crook, by rules or by breaking the rules, and so on and so forth, by fooling the people, by fooling the audience, by fooling the opposite side. Somehow they want to win. That's all they care. So are there some positives about arguments? Well, there are some. It may force you to reason and employ logic, meaning if you want to use purely arguments versus theories, it still forces you to do some homework, do some work, okay? Some work that has reasoning, that has logic, and so on. So it may help you. And of course, other people listening to you might benefit in that way. It also brings out inconsistencies. So for example, if I have a theory, just like my work for dating of Mahabharata, dating Rama, dating of Ramayana, dating of Rigveda, dating of Sushruta, dating of Vishnu Puran, dating of Bhagavad Puran, many other things. Okay. If I have proposed a theory, proposed a specific claim, and somebody now wants to argue with me, they may bring some evidence that may point to inconsistency in my thesis. Okay. Now that's a good thing. Something that if I was not aware, okay, if I was not aware, then say, okay, here is inconsistent. Now, how do you explain? Well, they should bring the inconsistency and wait and request. That's when we need that dandavat, humble. Unless you are a humble, pranipatena, as Aditya said, there is no question of pariprashnena before pranipatena. But it can bring out inconsistencies. And in that sense, it can be useful. It can help train one's thinking process. The person who is making an argument and the other side or the audience who is listening to the arguments. Okay. So it can help train the thinking process. So these are some of the very good, small, minor benefits. Now let's look at the negative side. Okay. What does it end up doing? Most cases, it will end up shooting down some person, usually the other side. Okay, is saying, okay, yeah, so you thought you have got a good claim, or you think your solution is the better. Well, here is the problem that I see. Now, come on, now that's done, right? Hey, your solution is no longer a solution. No, that doesn't happen. I'll give you an example of Newton or Kepler or Einstein. We can take any example. Newton's theory, even in Newton's times, there were many problems that were seen in a Newton's theory. Still, Newton was held, rightfully so, as one of the great scientists. Now, why? Because his theory still explained many more things than his predecessors. Okay, so remember, science is about more likely versus less likely, and always about finding a better solution, better theory, better claim than others. Okay, so what the pure arguments will do is only it will shoot down other person. It's like showing Newton, you think you are great, but here, how do you explain Mercury? And you also assume the speed of light to be constant. But look, here is something I have that shows that the speed of light is not constant. Actually, what Newton would say is, well, okay, I'm aware of those two. So now why don't you take those two assumptions into account, which you have pointed out, and come up with a solution, come up with a theory that is better than mine. Then I will admit yours, I'll accept yours. That they cannot do. But all that they have done in the process is shown that Newton is not as great as you guys think. Okay, the shooting down some person. It demonstrates intelligence. Like, somebody has done some work and found some evidence which shows the inconsistency. Naturally, it has shown some intelligence, because to show inconsistency, you have to understand some person's theory in some fashion. So yeah, it may demonstrate intelligence, argument, but also be aware that it can also exhibit stupidity. And the person who is doing it may not be even aware, okay, that instead of showing intelligence, he might be exhibiting a stupidity, but that indeed happens. In fact, the list I am showing you, once I complete the list, I'll mention that again if I forget. This one, I took it from a wonderful, very short, crisp blog article written by Professor S.N. Bal Gangadhar. He's at a university in Belgium. Okay, a very, very small blog. You can read it. It's also reproduced at my blog site. But very nicely it shows this, and a very beautiful blog. Okay, so it also exhibits stupidity. Now, what are the outcomes of arguments? I mean, besides making the heart harder, as Aditya ji said it very well, It is an unproductive occupation. It wastes everybody's time. Okay. And especially if it's carried too far. For example, to the extent of showing inconsistency, to the extent of showing us some practice, like practicing it, to the extent of saying, can I think reasonably? Can I apply logic? It's useful. But if it's taken too much, like that's all you are doing, it's an extremely unproductive occupation, waste your time, everybody's time. And as far as the progress of knowledge, the growth of knowledge, solving a problem, providing alternate solution, it doesn't do doesn't do anything. You do not advance the knowledge a great deal. Just let's compare with the argument theories and we'll stop. Now, similar to the arguments, but something more that theories make you do is it does force you to reason. It does force you to employ the logic, and it does make you check for consistency. Okay. You're not just pointing in somebody else in this case. You are trying to find inconsistency in your own theories based on the evidence. Okay. So it makes you do that a lot more than the argumentative guy. The activity advances a hypothesis. It may be not the final solution, but it does suggest a plausible solution. Like say water problem, it says, why don't we build another dam on this river? Okay. Or the floods on the city, in the cities near the ocean. You say, well, hold on, when this flood is gone, let's notice which areas had a water, either increase their height or move the houses, businesses, whatever from that area to some other areas. See, in America does a very good job of this, you would have noticed. And some other countries also, India also has the Sundarban is like that. When there are areas which can quickly get flooded, okay, can go underwater or in some kind of natural calamities, those areas are preserved as national parks. Not all of them, but I'm saying good number of them. What happens is it preserves the habitation, but also it saves the human lives because no houses will be built in that region and so on and so forth. Okay, so the activity advances the hypothesis, whether right or wrong, but it provides a plausible solution. Okay, that's the advantage over the arguments. And then it rejects or reformulate hypothesis, which means now that you have a hypothesis, it can be compared with existing solutions to see if this solution is a better. And if it's not better, you may reject it. But if it is a better, you may keep it. If it doesn't solve all the problem, or when it tries to solve the problem and there is some inconsistency, you say, how can I eliminate this inconsistency? In which case you may reformulate your theory, reformulate your hypothesis. So there is a progress of knowledge. Now, what does it do? Now, this is all good, you'll see, as opposed to the arguments. It tries to solve the problems. That's what the life is about, right? It tries to solve the problems. Why are we doing this science and technology and studying everything? That we can solve the problem. We can make the life better. Doing a theory as opposed to just an argumentation, the Jalpa Vitanda, is far more difficult. Extremely difficult. I can tell you from my experience. Unless you do it, unless you take a tough problem not solved by anyone and come up with a solution, you will have no idea what it takes to propose a theory, but what it takes to test a theory and come up with a better theory than everyone else, all your predecessors, whatever they have done. This is not an easy job. It's a very exciting job, very exhilarating, but not easy job. It's the proposing a theory, testing a theory is a different kettle of fish altogether. Any fool can get into arguments, and most fools do. Okay, that's not so when it comes to theory and solving problems. The theory is subject to many more constraints in comparison to arguments. Argumentists can just come and just say, hey, look, there is something on your face. Therefore, you are not clean enough. Okay. That's what the argument will do. The person doesn't have to worry about how much clean otherwise the individual is, how good job you have done. You might have heard the story of a painter, of an artist, who creates a beautiful painting and puts it in a square, like especially, here also like Santa Fe, but Santa Fe, you will see that. But if you go to Europe, almost every city is the city squares, you will see the painters the artists in the street, might be painting and putting it there. And you might have heard this story. So one artist put a painting there, a beautiful painting, and put a markers there and a piece of paper, saying, if you find any fault in this painting, Just take this marker and right on the painting of the surface, you can mark X. Okay. By the time he came back to see it after, say, a day, there were many X's, many marks on that painting. Now, what he did is he took the same painting, of course, the original clean painting, put it in another location, and this time he changed the methodology slightly. He said, anytime you see a fault in the painting, a mistake, as you said, don't do anything there, but on this piece of paper, mark X, and next to it, write your name and write down what that mistake is and how would you correct it. And guess what? When he came after a day, there was no suggestions there for what the mistake was, because the expectation was that if you found a mistake, you have to write your name, that, hey, I think this is a mistake, and you have to also provide a solution. That's what I mean by it's subject to many more constraints. It's a different kettle of fish. It's far more difficult to actually come up with a solution, even a plausible solution to solve a problem, a tough problem not solved by anyone else. Now, as I said, it's very exciting though. It takes a lot of hard work, but it's very exciting, more exhilarating than just the pure arguments, okay? And even when proved wrong, even when a theory is proved wrong, a hypothesis, that particular theory advances our knowledge, because now we know in a very systematic fashion what things will not work. Okay, so we have eliminated certain possibility. If you remember Thomas Edison's statement that he tried 1,000 different things to create a light bulb and still the light bulb is not working. And people said, are you not exhausted? Are you not convinced that you're not able to solve the problem? And he said, I mean, are you not tired? Like failure after failure? And he said, no, now I know 1,000 different specific ways that do not work. Okay, that is the benefit of a systematic approach. That is what theory demands. So Aditya, that's where I'm going to stop. I'll stop sharing. And if you have a few minutes, we can discuss a few things. We can take questions or we can stop.
No, you made very important points in Shastrarth. One of the things which comes up is that you have to publish your theories. You know, Shastras is done on established positions, not vaguely. Yes. And which is a point. And also you mentioned about the Oxford debates, and I already debunked that. Those are for TRP ratings mostly, that Oxford is organizing a debate. And the Oxford debates have gradually lost relevance day by day, especially because there are non-academic scholars also, people who are not part of university, people like you, who are not part of a formal university system, but we are challenging them from the outside. And with the advent of this kind of debate structure, which Sathology also is organizing everywhere, that the relevance of today's academic circles is reducing. Either they change or they are forced to change. Are they change voluntarily or they're forced to change? What is your view on that?
Correct. I agree with you. See, I have discussed this. I mean, I worked in corporate training for many years, like last 20 plus years, and worked very closely with academia. I mean, from the prestigious institutes in America, because I was in the corporate world, and many of the theories in the academic world are tested in the corporate world. You know, that's how the things work, like tried on the managers and see whatnot. And it is well known that, you know, this is the metaphor would be of a house that is internally made weak, eaten by termites, but from the outside it's not visible. And frankly, that is an issue in academia. I mean, again, we have many academics, researchers, professors, students listening to this, and they can, again, this can be a debate, like or not. But that's something I have seen many academics, by academics, I mean professors are aware of it. But they are not, two things. One is either they don't know what the alternate solution is. So in some sense, they are in the Jalpa Vitanda. They don't say, I don't know the alternate solution. So I might as well hope that this system survives at least until I retire. Okay. So that's one kind of hope, what do you call, say, optimistic scenario or a hope. You know, hope is the strategy. That's what they're doing. And others are really not sure what to do because they have a more commercial view of things. Because, you know, if you go to any university, you see how much real estate investments, like, you know, the buildings and the stadiums and all that is being put. I mean, people here recognize university which is a place for education, by the performance of their college teams, like college football teams and basketball teams and so on. And I'm not against them at all. I am saying that cannot be your key marker for the quality of education at your institute. It just cannot be, unless it's like a sports university. Okay, then I understand. So I think there are challenges like that. So to your point, many internally do recognize them. When I talk to them one-on-one, for example, without taking the name of a professor or a place, I'll tell you. I mean, I have a bachelor's, master's in engineering or a executive MBA, and this may be 5-10 years ago, doesn't matter. I was talking to a very famous professor from a business school, from a famous university. I'll just not mention the name of the university. And it was a social gathering. And then I was there, and some other person was asking me about my MBA program and how long that executive program was. And I said, you know what? This is how I see two things coming out of this MBA. One thing is, out of the whole syllabus or everything that I learned, frankly, I would say 3 or 4 courses were the key courses. Everything else was good, but if that could be just removed, at least for me. And the person laughed, sort of surprising, or is this really true? And when we were discussing this famous professor just walked in there. Okay. And I'm saying, hey, I was just talking about the MBA programs and my apologies. And he said, no, go on. And so the other guy who I just had said that, really the 3-4 courses is what it is, just looked at this professor and says, well, this guy, meaning me, is saying that out of those, whatever, 25-30 courses, only the 3 or 4 courses matter. Others is like a bakwas, waste of time kind of thing. And he was thinking that the professor would say, well, hold on, Nilesh, let me tell you. No, the professor said, even the professor did not ask me which courses. He said, yeah, he's right. So Aditya, you would love that. Okay. And then he went on. And then I said, well, so if you just look at those 3-4 courses, how long does it take to teach those? Now, every person may need 3 different courses. That's quite possible. And so I was saying, you know what, honestly, I think like it's like a few months, like 3 months, and you can cover the whole thing. And the professor said, well, actually, it can be covered in 2 weeks also. So the only reason I'm telling you this story is to convey the point. We might be oversimplifying and simplifying what I am saying or what the professor was saying. But there is an awareness within academia about the problem that is happening. And right now with the online and internet, I mean, who can beat actually what is available out there? That doesn't mean everyone has the ability, the discerning ability, the wada ability that we said, to exactly go and find out which one they should study and which one they should not waste their time. That is a challenge, and that's where university can do a good job, or the coaches and mentors and professors can do a good job. But anyways, that's my bit belaboring on that. But my point is, professors are aware. A good number of professors are aware of it.
The word guru has been used very commonly nowadays, very, very loosely, I would say, not commonly, loosely, that this is a guru, that is a guru. Now, the Sanskrit word gurutva karshan, gurutva, also comes from that.
Mm-hmm.
So, guru means heavy.
Yeah.
But everybody wants to use the word guru as a consultant, just for image sake, that I have a guru, like just for like acceptance in the academic circles.
Yeah.
Now, if you look at the ancient history, if someone doesn't have a guru, that means he cannot be a teacher, because for having to become a good teacher, you have to become a good student first. And every single guru in the history of our entire Vedic culture, 12209 BCE, 5561 BCE, or whatever the time frame people say, everybody, including Krishna, has accepted a guru. Very respectful. Panipatena, pariprashnena, both.
Correct.
But today it has become a very small word. What do you have to add on that? Because it pains me.
Yeah.
Like somebody who has not, like, who is just doing a popularity contest and he wants to become a guru.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm an eternal optimist, Aditya ji. And what I will add is this: what all the problems that you delineated are correct. Having said that, and this is not a contradictory position, but this is a supportive position in a slightly different fashion, which Krishna has also said. Krishna has said many things, which is to say the internet or the online education or the YouTube or many of these U Academy kind of thing, whoever, I mean, anyone interested, that's how the guru system was before, right? The specialization, like Krishna went to Sandipani, and, the Shuka Goswami went to the Vyasa, and then Vyasa sent Shuka to Janaka, depending on, just like our counselors, but here the counselors have a bit of a different job, but there is, this person will benefit if he goes to that individual and learns from it, very custom education, so to say. Now, that opportunity, if the person is smart enough, is being made available by this online business. I mean, online internet networking, right? So I see that in a very positive way, in an optimistic way. And now what Krishna said in the Bhagavad Puran, Bhagavad Puran he said, but at least it was documented at least more than 4,000 plus years ago in the Bhagavad Puran, where it says, Atmano Guru Atmaiva Purushasya Visheshata Yat Pratyaksha Anumanabhyam Shreyo Savano Vindate. So if you are sincere and if you have the basic prerequisites, then with the help of Pratyaksha and Anumana, with the help of a logic and with the help of evidence and your hard work, you can be your own guru. Okay, that is not to take away the need or a necessity of a living guru. That's not the point. But for a major purpose, just like, some students will go to some college and take their courses and then join the university. A major portion can be done as a Pratyaksha Anumana, but that has become possible now because of the modern technology and the fact like YouTube and many people who have entered the system. I find it very fascinating. So for example, if I want to know about certain subjects, I can have a YouTube video that goes 5 minutes, quick summary, another 15 minutes, and then 50 minutes and 5 hours and 5 days. How beautiful in some ways, right? But we should have an ability to discern the truth. Otherwise, we might be studying something totally wrong and think that now I'm educated.
No, one of the things comes into play is the guru business also, and I very much oppose the demeaning of guru culture by the Bollywood and the media, because they have made guru as very cheap, and also it is you. If you're prepared to be cheated, then only you will be cheated.
Well said.
So otherwise you don't get cheated. And also in the past, gurukuls were personality dependent. Vishwamitra's ashram, Shadbringa Rishi's ashram, Matanga Muni's ashram, very personal driven, because they had the subject matter expertise. Sutikshana Rishi ashram.
Correct.
Now, in the name of university culture, they have actually introduced Shunyavad, that this under the university, these are the professors there. But at the end of the day, you'll see the individual professor who is honest, he's automatically gets famous. But the Gurukul culture depends on the personality, and which is very much important and which should not be minimized on this Guru Purnima day. That will be our biggest contribution to a Gurukul culture if we start recognizing, and each one of you who is trained and who has been a good student must also be encouraged to start your own school.
Agreed.
So what is your view on that? This is what my final point.
No, agreed. Final last thought. So agreed. No, totally agree with you. And frankly, this just the concept that you described here is not even limited to education. I mean, we're talking guru and therefore education, but think of for the products also. Now what we get is a grade A milk, grade A corn, and grade A eggs or whatever the other products are, right? Before, even in America, I mean, what a great thing. It's like, say, Johnson Farm, corn from Johnson Farm. So the Johnson Farm was a brand, just like this. You're going to Sandipani Muni's ashram, you're going to Vishwamitra, you're going to Vasishtha. Immediately, just from the names, I mean, think of it. These people lived more than 7,000, 10,000, 15,000, 20,000 years ago, different Vishwamitra. As soon as you hear the word Vishwamitra, as soon as you hear the word Jamadagni, as soon as you hear the word Druvas, immediately a picture comes in front of you, is it not? Like Druvasa, oh, be careful, right? A tough person, individual. Vasishtha could be nice, will be knowledgeable, very hardworking, but I mean, like that. So same thing existed with the brand name, right? I mean, in some sense, they exist like an Apple product. You have certain expectation. So my point is that by grading, it is actually made too generalized. Okay, so back to your point, and there are efforts in America, I'm sure you are aware, where many people, many professors or deans who have left university career and going and experimenting with a system similar to Gurukula. It's a very small efforts, but they are happening, and they're happening around the world.
America is known for personality cults, and Guru is not a personality cult. It's a transparent via medium of ultimately the speaker of Veda, which is Vishnu. So Guru also is not the Guru is a transparent via medium, I always say, because he represents someone else. That's why he's respected. So the more people who maintain that transparency thing and do not try to control their people. See, the ultimate objective of a guru is to give independence of freedom.
Yeah, very much so.
And that's what the Bhagavad Gita focuses on. That's why I gave a talk on that. Bhagavad Gita is the ultimate book of the free people. And so with that, I'll end the show, and very informative session. A lot of information, Nilesh, as usual. And thank you all, and namaste. Everyone is invited to watch the channel, subscribe the channel, and also participate in the discussions if you meet our criteria. Namaste. Thank you.
Namaskar.